Get out of this lobby. Use the side end. Michael Harper. Criminal background flagged.
My name is Michael Harper.
Bribery. Former prosecutor.
Dad?
And you brought a child to a corporate interview?
She's sick. I had no one to watch her.
This is not a daycare. It's not a clinic.
Get out of this lobby. Maintenance workers use the side entrance. The receptionist's voice cut across the marble floor before I even reached the desk. I stopped with Emma asleep on my back, her cheek burning against my neck, her small red hospital wristband pressed against the collar of my work jacket. "I'm here for an interview," I said. The receptionist looked at my boots. Concrete dust clung to the soles. My pants were clean, but old. My jacket had been washed so many times, the company logo on the sleeve had faded into a gray stain. She gave a thin smile. "An interview for what? Janitorial?" A few applicants turned around. One man in a navy suit lowered his coffee cup and looked me up and down like I had dragged mud across his personal property. "My name is Michael Harper," I said. 10 o'clock. Field compliance supervisor. The receptionist typed my name. Her smile disappeared. Then something colder replaced it. "Michael Harper," she repeated, loud enough for the lobby to hear. Criminal background flagged. The room changed. Conversations stopped. Phones lowered. A woman holding a leather portfolio stepped slightly away from me, as if a record on a screen could rub off on her suit. The receptionist kept reading. Bribery, evidence tampering, obstruction, disbarred former prosecutor. She looked up. "Sir, this is Northbridge Meridian Group. We don't send people with your history to the executive floors." The man in the navy suit laughed under his breath. "Wrong building," he said. "Probation office is probably down the street." Another applicant chuckled. I felt Emma stir against my back. Her fingers tightened around my collar. "Dad?" she whispered. The word made the receptionist's eyes move to her, not with sympathy, with annoyance. "And you brought a child?" she said. "To a corporate interview?" "She's sick," I said. I had no one to watch her. "This is not a daycare, it's not a clinic, and it is definitely not a shelter." The applicants heard that. Some looked away, some did not. The navy suit looked at Emma's wristband and smirked. "Nice touch," he said. "Sick kid for sympathy. Bold strategy." My hands curled once. Then I opened them. Prison teaches you many things. The first is to keep your hands still when people try to make you angry. The second is that the world will believe the ugliest version of you if someone powerful typed it into a file. The receptionist slid the visitor clipboard away before I could reach it. "You need to leave," she said. "People like you create reputational risk. People like you. Not men, not fathers, not applicants. Dirty boots, cheap jacket, criminal record, sick child. A problem standing where polished people expected silence." Emma lifted her head. Her face was pale from fever, but her eyes were open now. She looked at the receptionist, then at the applicants, then at me. I tried to turn away so she would not see my face. Too late. Children know when adults are being cruel. They may not understand every word, but they understand the room. They understand when laughter is not laughter. They understand when their father has been made smaller in front of them. "I can wait," Emma said. "No, sweetheart. I can be quiet." She slid down from my back before I could stop her. Her sneakers touched the marble floor. For 1 second, she swayed and pressed one hand against her chest. My whole body moved toward her, but she shook her head, trying to be brave before anyone had asked her to be. 6 years old, heart failing, still trying to make herself less trouble. She walked to the row of chairs beside the glass wall and climbed onto the last seat by herself. No one helped her. Not the receptionist, not the security guard, not the 12 applicants waiting to prove they were leadership material. Emma placed her little medicine bag on her lap. Her feet did not reach the floor. They hung still above the marble, too tired even to swing. Then she looked at me. "Dad," she said, "go make them see you." No one laughed after that. The receptionist looked away first. The man in the navy suit stared into his coffee. And somewhere above us, on the 32nd floor, Chairman Robert Vale watched the whole thing on a security monitor. He already knew my name. He also knew my face from the evening before. I had been carrying Emma out of St. Agnes Children's Hospital when an old man in a charcoal coat shouted near the parking entrance. A young man had snatched the phone from his hand and sprinted toward the street. I should have kept walking. Emma was tired. Her breathing was wrong. The discharge papers in my pocket said follow up immediately if symptoms worsened, but old instincts are not polite enough to wait for convenience. I handed Emma to the nearest security guard, ran across the wet pavement, caught the thief near the exit gate, and pulled the phone out of his hand before he could throw it into traffic. The screen was cracked when I gave it back. The old man asked my name. I told him it did not matter, but apparently, it had. The receptionist's phone rang before she could tell me to leave a second time. She picked it up with the same cold expression she had used on me, but within seconds, her face changed, her shoulders straightened. Her voice dropped into something almost respectful. Yes, Chairman Vale. That name moved through the lobby like a door locking. When she hung up, she did not apologize. People like her rarely do. They only change their tone when someone above them makes cruelty inconvenient. Mr. Harper, she said, your interview will proceed. The man in the navy suit stopped smiling. A woman in a cream-colored suit stepped out of the elevator bank and walked toward Emma. Unlike everyone else in that lobby, she knelt before speaking. That small act almost broke me. She introduced herself as Claire from the chairman's office and promised Emma apple juice, crackers, and a quiet place to rest. Emma looked at me for permission. I nodded because I had no better choice to offer her. As Claire helped her down from the chair, Emma held the medicine bag against her chest and whispered the sentence that had already become heavier than any prayer I knew. Go make them see you. No one laughed this time. Have you ever been judged by the lie someone powerful told about you, not by the truth you nearly died carrying? Then stay with this story. Because that morning, while my daughter sat alone in a glass lobby with a hospital wristband on her tiny wrist, the lie that buried me finally made its first mistake. A security guard walked me to the elevator. He did not touch me, but he stayed close enough to remind me what a flagged background meant in a building like Northbridge. Men like me did not move through glass towers. We were escorted through them. The elevator doors closed, and my reflection came back at me in the polished steel. Concrete-stained boots, faded jacket, tired eyes, a hospital sticker still clinging to my sleeve from Emma's last blood test. 5 years earlier, elevators like that had opened for me without hesitation. Back then, I carried trial folders instead of hospital bills. I wore pressed suits instead of work jackets. People did not ask whether I belonged in places like this. They asked what floor I needed. Then 47 seconds disappeared from a hotel camera. A cash envelope appeared where no cash should have been. My mother's bank account received money she had never seen, and the world decided a file was easier to believe than a man. The 32nd floor was quiet in the expensive way. Carpet swallowed footsteps. Glass walls displayed charity photos, safety awards, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and framed statements about public trust. Public trust. I almost laughed. A conference room waited at the end of the hall. 3 interviewers sat inside: human resources, field operations, and legal compliance. They looked at my boots first, my file second, and my face last. That order told me everything. They reminded me the job was not legal counsel. It was field compliance. Contractor logs, safety reports, inspection records, materials documentation, incident reviews. They spoke carefully, as if the words might prove I had walked into the wrong room. I listened. Most people think lies begin in secret meetings. They do not. They begin in paperwork that almost looks normal. A report written too cleanly. A date that fits the story but not the weather. A signature copied by someone who assumes no one will zoom in. A sentence that sounds like procedure but was built as an exit door. The compliance interviewer slid a sample folder toward me. I read the first page and felt an old part of myself wake up. The report claimed a concrete pour had been protected before an overnight freeze, but the delivery times and the weather log did not agree. The notes sounded too polished for a field record. They were not written like a man standing in a trailer at 2 a.m. with wet gloves and a dead phone battery. They were written like someone preparing to defend a mistake after it had already happened. The room expected me to struggle. Instead, I looked up. People lie on paper before they lie in concrete. The pen in the compliance man's hand stopped moving. That was the first time anyone in that room looked at me like I might be more than the record in front of them. They gave me a contract clause next. Buried inside it was a contradiction that shifted blame to Northbridge if a subcontractor later claimed a verbal change order. It was not a typo. It was too useful to be a typo. Someone had built a future excuse into the contract and hoped the field team would never notice. I explained it without raising my voice. The operations man leaned forward. Human resources stopped watching my hands. The compliance man looked through the glass wall, suddenly less comfortable with his own documents. That was when Robert Vale entered. The room stood. I remained seated a second too long because my body had forgotten how quickly powerful men expected gravity to obey them. Robert Vale was taller than he looked on television, older up close, with silver hair and a calm face that did not quite reach his eyes. He had the tiredness of a man who had spent years letting other people call damage, cost of doing business. His gaze moved past me, through the glass wall. Emma sat at a small desk with Claire. She held a juice box in both hands, crackers lined up in front of her like she was saving them for later. Then she offered one to Claire, solemnly, as if she had not just been humiliated in the lobby below. Robert watched that for a moment. Something in his face shifted. Not pity. Recognition. Years later, I would learn that Robert Vale had kept a private folder of letters from families harmed in the Northbridge Pharma case. Letters his lawyers told him not to answer. Letters he had read at night when the company was quiet, and guilt had no staff to intercept it. He had also kept documents about a restitution fund created after the settlement. On paper, it existed to help families harmed by the drug and by the proceedings around the case. In practice, it had been buried under forms, deadlines, narrow definitions, and legal language, so cold, most families never found the door. Robert had never been sure whether I was guilty, but he had never been sure I was guilty either. That was the part that mattered. A man who wants to believe a lie does not keep reading the letters. He sat at the head of the table and asked why I was there. There were many answers I could have given. I needed work. I had experience. I was not the man the headlines had buried. None of those answers was sharp enough. So I gave him the only one that mattered. My daughter needs heart surgery, and every door with my name on it has closed. His eyes moved to Emma again. Emma had been my granddaughter by blood. After Daniel died, I became her legal guardian, and she became the only person left in the world who called me Dad. And I stopped correcting her because the word kept both of us alive. Robert did not ask for the whole story. Good men do not always ask where the wound came from. Sometimes they simply stop pressing on it. I told him the sample report had been written backward from a conclusion. I told him the contract clause had been designed to become a trap later. I told him the initials on 2 inspection notes were too similar to be natural. Not enough to accuse anyone. Enough to make the room uncomfortable. Robert understood discomfort. Men like him built careers walking past it. But this time he did not walk past. He stood and said, "Prepare a conditional offer." The words landed harder than kindness. Kindness would have been easier to distrust. A job was dangerous because it made hope practical. I should have felt relief. Instead, all I felt was the old fear of a door opening too quickly. Second, chances do not arrive clean. They come with fingerprints on them. They come with people waiting outside to prove you never deserved one. An hour later, I left Northbridge with a temporary badge clipped to my jacket and Emma asleep against my side in the back of a rideshare I could not afford. She had cracker crumbs on her hoodie and apple juice on her sleeve. When the car turned towards Street Agnes Children's Hospital, her eyes opened halfway. "Did they see you?" she murmured. I looked down at the badge. My photo was too dark. My name sat beneath it. Across the bottom, in red block letters, was one word: temporary. "Maybe a little," I said. Emma smiled without opening her eyes. "Good." Then, she fell asleep again. I held that badge all the way back to the hospital, not because I was proud of it, but because I was afraid it might vanish if I put it down. The cardiology wing smelled like antiseptic, warm plastic, and vending machine coffee. By then, I knew every sound in that hallway: medication carts rolling over tile, monitors beeping behind closed doors, nurses lowering their voices before entering rooms where parents had learned to read faces before words. Dr. Patel was waiting near the nurses' station. His expression told me the news before his mouth did. The latest scan showed more strain. Her heart was still compensating, but badly. The timeline they had given me before was no longer safe. Then Dr. Patel said the sentence that took the floor out from under me. 2 weeks would be safer. 2 weeks. Not 4. Not enough time for a first paycheck. Not enough time for insurance paperwork to become mercy. Not enough time for a man with $17.32 in his account and a temporary badge on his jacket to become the kind of father a hospital bill respected. After insurance review, after every adjustment, after every word designed to sound less impossible, the number still stood at $48,000. There are amounts of money that feel large. Then there are amounts that feel fictional, like someone wrote them down only to prove love could lose to math. I looked through the glass at Emma's sleeping face. Her red wristband circled her tiny wrist. Earlier that morning, strangers in a corporate lobby had looked at that bracelet and seen inconvenience, manipulation, reputational risk. I saw a clock, a small red clock, counting down on the wrist of the only person left in the world who still called me Dad. That night, after Emma fell asleep in the hospital chair beside me, I opened my banking app. $17.32. A temporary job. A ruined name. 2 weeks. And inside Northbridge Meridian, my name had already reached the one man who most needed it buried. Evan Vale received the internal hiring alert before midnight. I did not know that then. I did not know. He stared at the screen long enough for his drink to go warm in his hand. I did not know he called 2 people after that, both from numbers saved under names that were not names. I did not know Robert had been quietly asking questions about the old pharma case for months, or that my return made Evan see what he had always feared. Loose paper, a living witness, a buried case with a pulse again. By morning, Evan Vale had decided that if Robert was foolish enough to bring me back inside Northbridge, then both of us had to be destroyed before either of us found the drawer he had spent 5 years keeping shut. I did not know any of that when I showed up for my first day. All I knew was that I had slept in a plastic hospital chair, washed my face in a public restroom, and changed into the cleanest work shirt I owned, while Emma pretended not to notice how carefully I folded the same jacket I had worn the day before. She was sitting up in bed when I left, one hand around a paper cup of apple juice, the red wristband still loose around her tiny wrist. "Don't be late," she said. "I won't. For dinner. I won't." She looked at me the way children look when they are old enough to know adults lie for kind reasons. Then she lifted her wrist and pointed to the bracelet. I wrote something on it. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. "Not yet," she said. "Only when you need it." I wanted to smile. I almost managed it. Then I went to Northbridge with $17 in my account, $48,000 standing between Emma and surgery, and a temporary badge clipped to my jacket like a question nobody wanted to answer. The job site was a half-built transit center east of Baltimore, all steel beams, wet concrete, generator noise, and men moving through dust like they had no time for anyone's personal tragedy. A field manager named Ron Caldwell walked me through the site with the stiff patience of a man ordered to accept a problem from upstairs. He did not ask about Emma. He did not ask about my case. That made him better than most. He showed me the safety binder, incident reports, subcontractor logs, materials receipts, inspection board, and the trailer where field paperwork came to die in stacks. His explanation was quick, almost dismissive. He expected me to nod, get overwhelmed, and prove Robert Vale had made a sentimental mistake. By noon, I had found 3 missing signatures, 2 late incident forms, and 1 steel delivery receipt with a batch number that did not match the supplier's manifest. Most of it was ordinary mess. Construction sites are not courtrooms. Paperwork gets filled out after long shifts by men whose hands hurt. Dates are corrected. Coffee stains cover corners. A foreman writes yesterday when he means Tuesday because he has been awake since 4. Mess did not bother me. Clean lies did. The steel receipt bothered me. It was too neat. The wrong number sat in the right font. The initials looked careful instead of tired. Whoever touched that document had not been rushing to finish paperwork before dinner. They had been trying to make something wrong look finished. I set it aside. Ron noticed. "What's wrong with it?" "Maybe nothing." He stared at me. That was the 3rd thing prison teaches you. Never say everything you know while you are still finding out who benefits from your silence. So I left it there. By 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a hospital update. Emma's fever had stayed down. She had eaten half a pudding cup. She had asked whether people with repaired hearts could run faster afterward. I read the message twice. Then I put the phone away and kept working because love does not stop the clock. It only makes every minute louder. Near the end of the day, Claire came to the site. She did not wear the cream-colored suit from the lobby. She wore a dark coat, no jewelry, hair pulled back, carrying a sealed envelope against her side. People from executive floors do not usually walk onto muddy construction sites unless something has gone wrong or is about to. She asked me to step into the small records room behind the trailer. Inside, she placed the envelope on the table. No speech, no dramatic warning, just one sentence. Chairman Vale asked me to let you see this. The envelope contained a copy of my old conviction summary. Not the full case file. Just enough to bleed. A hotel room. Cash envelope. Witness statement. Bank transfer. Camera footage gap. 47 seconds. It was strange, seeing your life reduced to bullet points. The worst day you ever lived becomes a clean paragraph. Your disgrace gets margins. Your wife leaving becomes irrelevant. Your son standing outside the courthouse becomes irrelevant. The way your mother cried when reporters came to her apartment becomes irrelevant. Paper does not care what it leaves out. Claire watched me carefully. Mr. Vale has questions about what happened 5 years ago, she said. He has had them for a long time. I looked up. That should have made me angry. Maybe it did. But anger was a luxury I had spent years pawning. Questions don't help much after sentencing. She accepted that without defending him. That made me trust her a little more. Robert had not sent the envelope as charity. It was not an apology. It was a test, maybe. Or an invitation. Or the first careful opening of a door he should have opened, when the truth still had a pulse. I turned the page. There it was. The Harbor Regent, room 614. The place where my life ended while I was still alive. 5 years earlier, I had been investigating Northbridge Pharma after a school nurse in Annapolis noticed a pattern no one powerful wanted noticed. Children taking a popular medication were arriving at clinics with reactions the company kept calling unrelated. Internal complaints rose, then vanished from quarterly summaries. A draft safety memo warned that disclosure could not be delayed. In the margin, someone had written 5 words. Delay until donor issue clears. That memo came home with me one night in a locked briefcase because I no longer trusted the office copier. Rachel was my wife then. She had stayed through long trials, late-night calls, and the kind of stress that makes dinner go cold without anyone saying why. She read the memo at our kitchen table while Daniel tried to get baby Emma to sleep down the hall. Rachel did not ask if I was sure. She asked what it would cost. I told her the truth. My job, maybe. My license. Our savings. My reputation if Northbridge fought dirty enough. She folded the memo once, carefully, and pushed it back to me. Then make sure it costs you for the right reason. That was not permission. It was faith. And faith can be a terrible thing to break. 2 days before I planned to file the first subpoenas, a message came from a confidential source claiming to have internal Northbridge files. He insisted on meeting at a hotel near the harbor because, he said, there were cameras and people around. I knew it felt wrong before I went. That is the part I never forgave myself for. Not because I caused the trap, but because some part of me had smelled smoke and still walked into the building. The man in room 614 was sweating when I arrived. He would not sit. He kept looking toward the smoke detector, then the door, then his phone. Fear can be real or performed. His was both. That made it good. He had a folder on the table. Inside were useless printouts and one thick envelope. Cash. I stepped back immediately. A younger version of me still believed immediate reaction mattered. Step back. Refuse. Report. Document. Do everything cleanly, and cleanliness will protect you. That younger version did not know men like Evan Vale hired people to make cleanliness look like guilt. The man pushed the envelope toward me. I pushed it back. He grabbed my sleeve. The hallway light flickered through the cracked door. Somewhere outside the room, a camera recorded what it was allowed to keep. Later, prosecutors would play the clip again and again. Me entering. Me leaving with a folder. No sound. No cash refusal. No sleeve grab. Only the part they needed. 47 seconds were missing from the corridor footage. The expert from Civitas Image Solutions testified that the loss came from a routine overwrite error. Routine. That word helped convict me. Routine made a missing piece sound like dust on a shelf instead of a hand over a mouth. Then came the bank transfer. My mother's name sat in black ink beside an amount she had never touched. Money routed through 2 shell entities and dropped into her account like poison in a well. She had called me crying, saying she did not know where it came from. By then, nobody wanted her fear. They wanted her account number. The witness cried on the stand. The camera expert sounded calm. The bank record looked official. Rachel tried to believe me. For a while, she did. She sat behind me during the first week of trial with both hands clenched in her lap. But public shame gets into a home like smoke. It coats the furniture. It gets into clothes. It turns every grocery store whisper into another argument waiting in the kitchen. By the second week, she stopped coming. I told myself I did not blame her. That was the kindest Lee I had. Daniel believed me longer than anyone. He stood outside the courthouse with Emma in a stroller, while reporters shouted questions over her head. After the verdict, he hugged me once in a hallway with deputies waiting and said, "Dad, I know who you are." That sentence kept me alive in prison longer than food. Claire's voice brought me back to the records room. "There was also the restitution fund," she said. I looked down at another page. After the pharma settlement, Northbridge had created a fund for families harmed by the drug and by related proceedings. It sounded generous on television. In real life, the requirements had been impossible. Families needed proof Northbridge already knew how to contest. Deadlines passed before most people received notice. Claims were denied for missing forms no one had told them existed. Paperwork had not only buried me, it had buried them too. "Why now?" I asked. Claire hesitated. "Because Mr. Vale believes Evan may have been involved." There it was. Not proof. Not justice. A belief whispered inside a construction trailer 5 years after it could have saved my name. I should have walked out. But Emma had 2 weeks. And the steel receipt was still sitting on the table outside, too clean to be innocent. I put the conviction summary back into the envelope. "Tell Robert beliefs don't reopen cases." Claire nodded. Then I added, "Patterns do." That was all I gave her. That evening, I returned to Street Agnes with a cup of soup from the hospital cafeteria and a pack of crackers I had taken from the job site break table. Emma was awake, sitting cross-legged in bed, drawing on the back of an old insurance form. She had drawn 3 people, a tall man with square shoulders, a little girl with a red bracelet, and a third person above them, made of blue crayon, with wings too large for the paper. Daniel. She did not remember him clearly. She had been too young when he died. But children build memory from photographs, stories, and the ache in adults' voices when a name enters the room. "Is that your dad?" I asked. She looked up at me. "You're my dad." I sat beside her. The soup went cold in my hand. She pointed at the blue figure. "That's the dad who gave me to you." There are sentences a child says without knowing they have opened a room inside you. I looked at Daniel's crayon wings and thought of him outside the courthouse years earlier, holding Emma in a stroller while reporters shouted questions over her head. He had been 24, exhausted, angry, still believing truth had weight if you carried it long enough. I wanted to tell Emma all of it. I wanted to tell her that Daniel had fought for me when everyone else stepped back, that he had worked nights after I came home, that he had died on a warehouse shift he took, because bills do not care how tired a young father is. But she was 6, and sick, and still trying to draw wings big enough to make absence look kind. So I only touched the edge of the paper and said, "He loved you first." She thought about that. "Then you loved me after?" "No," I said. "I loved you too. I just got more time." She accepted this with the seriousness of a judge. Then, she held out her wrist. "Now you can look." I turned her hand gently. On the inside of the red hospital bracelet, written in crooked blue marker, were the words she had hidden from me that morning. "Don't let them make you small." I stared at it until the letters blurred. All day, Northbridge had been testing whether I was still useful. The hospital had been testing whether I was still solvent. The world had been testing whether I was still allowed to stand upright under the weight of a name it had already buried. And my 6-year-old daughter, who owned nothing but a medicine bag and more courage than her body could afford, had given me the only instruction that mattered. Don't let them make you small. The next morning, the first article appeared. It did not come from a major newspaper. That would have been too obvious. It came from a business blog with anonymous sourcing and just enough polish to look legitimate. By lunch, financial accounts were repeating the same phrase. Northbridge's controversial new hire raises questions about Chairman Vale's judgment. They used my mugshot. They mentioned the hotel room, the cash envelope, and the missing footage only as a technical dispute, not as the hole where my innocence had been buried. They did not mention Emma by name, but they mentioned a visibly ill child present during the hiring process, and asked whether Robert had been emotionally manipulated. That was when I knew Evan had not just noticed me. He had moved. He was not waiting for Robert to reopen the old drawer. He was setting the building on fire before anyone could reach it. My landlord called that night. He did not shout. He sounded embarrassed, which is how people sound when they are about to do something cruel and would like you to help them feel decent while they do it. He mentioned building policy, tenant complaints, media attention, insurance concerns. He gave me 48 hours. I packed the apartment after midnight, 2 duffel bags, 1 box of Emma's clothes, 1 plastic bin of medicine papers, unpaid bills, old legal documents, and the pieces of a life I had failed to protect neatly enough for anyone else to respect. Daniel's photo went in last. By dawn, everything we owned fit in the trunk of my car. For the next 2 nights, I slept in the hospital parking garage. Level 3, near the elevator. Under a light that flickered every few minutes like it was trying to decide whether I deserved to be seen. I folded the back seat down and covered the boxes with a blanket so Emma would not notice when I took her for short walks. I brushed my teeth in the restroom near radiology. I changed shirts in the car before driving to the job site. I answered Northbridge emails from the driver's seat with the temporary badge hanging from the mirror like a cruel joke. At work, the site had become quieter around me. Men who had joked near me on Monday now stopped talking when I walked by. A subcontractor left inspection logs on a table instead of handing them to me. Someone taped my mugshot inside the portable toilet. By lunch, it was gone. But not before I saw it. I did not report it. Some humiliations matter because they block the truth. Others are just stones thrown by people who need to feel taller. I stepped over that one. Then Northbridge began to fall. A whistleblower package had been sent to regulators, board members, and 3 major news outlets. It claimed Northbridge had concealed structural defects at the East Harbor Transit Center, the very project where I was now working. The documents accused Robert Vale of delaying disclosure to protect a public contract. There were inspection reports, photos of damaged supports, emails between executives, and a memo stamped with a red seal that looked official enough to scare anyone reading fast. Cable news ran drone footage of our job site like it was a crime scene. City officials suspended payments. Board members leaked concerns about Robert's leadership. By evening, Evan Vale was on television. He looked wounded. That was his gift. Some men lie with anger. Evan lied with disappointment. He said Northbridge needed transparency. He said public safety had to come before family loyalty. He said he loved his uncle, but the company could not survive if trust was sacrificed for personal judgment. Personal judgment. That meant me. I watched the clip from the parking garage. Rain sliding down the windshield. Emma 8 floors above me trying to sleep through another round of tests. Evan was not improvising. He had set 2 fires with 1 match. First, he made Robert look unstable for hiring me. Then he made Robert look corrupt for allegedly hiding structural defects. If Robert fell, the old pharma drawer stayed closed. If I became part of the scandal, nobody would believe anything I found. Evan was not just attacking a company. He was burying a witness before the witness could speak. The next morning, Claire called. Her voice was calm, but too thin. Robert wanted me to review the whistleblower documents before the emergency board meeting. Not officially, not as legal counsel, just another set of eyes. Another set of eyes. That was what powerful people called you when they needed the gift but could not afford the name attached to it. I should have said no. Emma needed me. I had slept maybe 9 hours in 3 days. My hands shook when I drank coffee. The surgery deposit still stood between us and any future worth imagining. But the word documents pulled at something old inside me. Not hope. Angst. Claire arranged a secure tablet in a small conference room beside the site trailer. The room smelled like wet dust, toner, and burnt coffee. Outside, workers moved slower than usual, all of them aware that a suspended project meant suspended paychecks. I opened the whistleblower packet. At first glance, it looked devastating. That was the first thing wrong with it. Real evidence is rarely that clean. Real evidence has gaps. It has frustration. It contradicts itself in small human ways because real life does not prepare exhibits. This packet moved like a performance. Every page pointed at Robert. Every image supported the same conclusion. Every email sounded exactly like what a guilty executive would write if he wanted prosecutors to hate him. I slowed down. The first document was an inspection report dated March 14. It claimed an independent inspector had entered the East Harbor site that morning and documented structural warnings. I checked the site closure notice. Severe storm, high winds, crane suspension, gates locked from 6 a.m. to midnight. No inspection could have happened that day. Not legally, not physically, not without a ghost signing the visitor log. One impossible date does not prove a conspiracy, but it tells you where to dig. The next page carried 3 inspection acknowledgments, supposedly signed weeks apart by the same inspector. At normal size, they looked fine. Zoomed in, they were too fine. The same flattened curve on the R, the same broken tail on the final initial. Not similar. Identical. A human hand repeats habits. It does not repeat pixels. The third problem was the red seal on the memo, accusing Robert of delaying disclosure. It sat a little too high on the letterhead, overlapping a line official seals did not usually touch. I had seen marks like that before. Copied, lifted, dropped into a new file by someone who trusted authority more than alignment. The fourth problem made my hands go cold. Civitas Image Solutions. The name was buried in the file properties of the security export attached to the packet. Most people would never see it. Most people would not care. I did. Civitas was the company that certified the hotel footage in my bribery case. The same company that explained away the missing 47 seconds. For a moment, the room around me went silent in a way. Rooms only do when the past walks in without knocking. March 14. Copier signature. Lifted seal. Civitas. Fourpoint. 1. Shape. Evans shape. I called Claire. Tell Chairman Vale not to resign. She went quiet. I looked at the red seal on the screen and thought of Emma's bracelet, of the words hidden inside it. Don't let them make you small. Then I said the sentence I had not been allowed to say 5 years earlier, while anyone still cared enough to listen. The documents are fake. For a few seconds, Claire said nothing. In that silence, I heard the rain tapping against the trailer window, the low hum of the old air conditioner, and the distant metallic rhythm of workers moving through a job site that might not exist by the end of the week. Then she asked the question no one had asked me in 5 years, like the answer might matter. Are you sure? I looked at the 4 pieces on the screen. March 14. The copied signature. The lifted red seal. Civitas Image Solutions. I'm sure enough to stop him from resigning. 20 minutes later, a black Northbridge SUV pulled up outside the site trailer. Claire sat in the back with a tablet, 2 hard drives, and a face so pale, it told me the company was closer to collapse than the news had admitted. On the drive to headquarters, she explained that the emergency board meeting had been moved up. Robert's resignation statement was already drafted. Evan had arrived early with outside counsel. News cameras were waiting outside. Regulators wanted original files by morning. It was a perfect trap. Too perfect. That was Evan's mistake. The first time he destroyed me, he buried the lie inside panic. A hotel room, a crying witness, a missing piece of footage, money in the wrong account. Everyone moved too fast to look closely. This time, he had grown arrogant. Every document pointed too neatly at Robert. Every memo sounded too guilty. Every page looked like it had been built for television. Real truth does not perform that well. When we reached Northbridge, reporters shouted as the SUV entered the underground garage. I kept my head down, not because I was ashamed, but because cameras do not capture truth. They capture angles. Claire took me through a service corridor into a records room behind the board suite. Robert Vale was waiting there without his jacket, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by boxes of project files. He looked less like a chairman now, and more like an old man standing inside the wreckage of every compromise he had once called necessary. His eyes went to the tablet in my hand. How bad is it? Bad for Evan, I said. If you let me show it right. He closed his eyes for half a second. Not relief. Grief. I understood then that some part of Robert had already known. Maybe not the documents, maybe not this exact attack, but he had known his nephew was capable of it. He had simply spent years choosing not to know loudly enough. Robert opened a drawer and placed one old folder on the table. Northbridge Pharma. The name sat on the tab like a wound that had never healed. I kept it, he said. I did not touch it. Why? Because I never believed the case ended clean. That should have made me furious. 5 years. Prison. My law license. Daniel working himself into the grave. Emma growing up beside hospital bills and old headlines. A rich man had doubts, but anger would not save Emma, and it would not stop Evan. So I only said, doubts don't fix what you let happen. Robert took that without defending himself. That was the first decent thing he did in that room. The boardroom doors opened at 4. Robert entered first. I followed with one gray document box. The room was full. Board members, outside counsel, crisis consultants, people with expensive pens and terrified eyes. Evan stood near the far end of the table, already dressed for the version of the future where he inherited the company after burying his uncle. When he saw me, he gave a small smile. "Uncle Robert," he said, "bringing Mr. Harper into this room may satisfy your guilt, but it will not satisfy regulators." Several board members looked down. They had been prepared for me. Convicted prosecutor, public liability, bad optics, a ruined name in work boots. Evan turned toward the room, voice calm, almost wounded. "We cannot rebuild public trust by relying on a man convicted of corrupting evidence." I set the gray box on the table. The sound was small. It still stopped him. Robert did not defend me. That mattered. I did not need the room to believe another powerful man. I needed them to look at paper long enough for paper to betray the people using it. I took out the first page. The whistleblower report said an inspector entered the East Harbor Transit Center on March 14 and documented structural warnings. Beside it, I placed the city storm closure notice. Same date. Site locked from 6 a.m. to midnight. High winds. Crane suspension. No authorized entry. No speech. No drama. Just 2 documents that could not both be true. The general counsel leaned forward first. Lawyers know collision when they see it. Next came the signatures. 3 inspection acknowledgments, supposedly signed weeks apart. I placed the enlarged copies side by side. The same broken tail. The same flattened curve. The same flaw repeated in a way no human hand repeats by accident. "A man can sign similarly," I said. "He cannot sign in pixels." One board member removed his glasses. The third page was the red seal. The memo accusing Robert of delaying disclosure carried an official-looking seal across the top. I placed it beside an old permit approval from 8 months earlier. Same seal. Same slight scratch through the outer ring, lifted from one document and dropped into another. By then, Evan's smile was gone. He began talking about expert review, chain of custody, context, pressure, the danger of rushing to conclusions. He said exactly what careful men say when they need more time to move the exits. I let him talk. Then I placed the 4th page on the table. Civitas, Image Solutions. The room did not understand the name at first. Evan did. His face changed before he could stop it. That was the moment I knew the truth had touched bone. I told the board what Civitas was. Not the whole story. Not my pain. Pain does not prove anything in a boardroom. I told them Civitas had handled the hotel footage in my bribery case 5 years earlier. I told them a Civitas expert had called it a routine overwrite error under oath. Then I pointed to the whistleblower security export. The same company. The same kind of missing segment. The same clean explanation waiting to be used. Fourpoint. En impossible date. À copier signature. A stolen seal. The same camera company that helped bury me. I looked at Evan. "You didn't change the method," I said. "You only changed the target." For the first time all day, his voice lost its polish. "You're desperate, Harper." That was true. I was desperate. My daughter was in a hospital bed with 2 weeks becoming less than 2 weeks. My belongings were in the trunk of my car. My name was still a stain people used when they wanted to end a conversation. But desperation does not put March 14 on a locked site. Desperation does not copy a signature. Desperation does not lift a seal. Desperation does not hire the same company twice and hope the man they ruined has forgotten how lies are built. Robert nodded once to Claire. She connected his cracked black phone to the boardroom screen. The same phone I had taken back outside Street Agnes. The phone Robert had almost lost to what everyone thought was a random thief. On it was a voice memo recorded accidentally during a car ride. Most of it was useless noise. Traffic, leather seats shifting. Robert telling his driver to use the hospital entrance. Then Evan's voice came through. Muffled. Impatient. Clear enough. He was speaking to someone named Miller about the March 14 packet, the Civitas clean version, and making sure Robert was removed before anyone reopened the pharma drawer. No one moved. The recording was not the whole case. It was not enough by itself, but it was the key that opened the locked door. Outside counsel stood. General counsel ordered an evidence hold. Claire sent the packet to independent forensic analysts. Robert had already notified regulators before entering the room. Evan reached for process, but process had turned against him. By sunset, he was stripped of authority. By midnight, Northbridge issued a statement confirming the whistleblower packet contained fabricated materials and had been referred to state and federal investigators. By morning, the language around my name began to change. Not completely. The world does not give back a reputation in one headline, but one word appeared where certainty had been for 5 years. Alleged. Alleged misconduct. Alleged evidence manipulation. Alleged frame-up in the Harper case. It was a small word, unless you have lived without it. At 6:40 a.m., Dr. Patel called. Emma's oxygen levels had dropped overnight. The surgery could not wait for public statements, board votes, forensic reports, or the slow mercy of committees. I drove to Street Agnes wearing the same clothes I had worn into the boardroom. Robert was already there. That surprised me more than the boardroom had. He stood near the nurse's station without cameras, without assistants, without anyone to witness his concern and turn it into public relations. He held a folder in both hands. It was not a personal check. I would not have taken it. Maybe he knew that. Inside was emergency approval from the restitution fund Northbridge had been legally required to maintain after the pharma settlement. The same fund Claire had shown me in the old summary. The same fund buried so deep in procedures that most families had never found a way through it. Robert had ordered outside counsel to reopen eligibility overnight for children and families harmed by the original concealment and by related proceedings. Emma qualified through Daniel's dependent claim, connected to the old pharma case. Paperwork had helped bury us. For once, paperwork opened a door. The surgical deposit cleared at 8:15. At 8:42, I signed the consent forms. My hand shook so badly, the nurse rested her palm near the page, not touching me, just close enough to steady the moment. Emma was awake when they rolled her toward the operating doors. She looked too small under the hospital blanket, too small for the machines, too small for the courage adults kept borrowing from her. Her red wristband circled her wrist. I turned it gently. On the inside, in crooked blue letters, were the words she had hidden there. Don't let them make you small. I pressed my forehead to her hand. I'll be right here, I told her. She was tired, but she still whispered, "Go make them see you." Then the doors opened, and the world took her where I could not follow. Surgery lasted 6 hours and 17 minutes. People say waiting is passive. They are wrong. Waiting can strip a man down to the studs. It can make every prayer feel too small. It can make every memory arrive sharpened at the edges. Daniel holding newborn Emma, Rachel folding the safety memo across our kitchen table, my mother crying over money she never touched, the hotel corridor, the missing 47 seconds, Emma's feet hanging above the marble lobby floor. At 3:26 p.m., Dr. Patel came through the doors. He looked exhausted. Then he smiled. The sound that came out of me did not feel like speech. 3 months later, the court vacated my conviction pending full evidentiary review. 6 months later, Evan Vale was indicted for evidence fabrication, obstruction, securities fraud, and witness tampering. Civitas executives began cooperating after federal agents seized company servers. The hotel witness recanted. My mother's bank transfer was traced to a shell entity tied to Evan's fixer. The missing 47 seconds were recovered from an archived backup everyone had been told no longer existed. Robert resigned after turning over the old pharma files and reopening the restitution process. Some people called him brave. Some called him too late. Both were true. As for me, I did not walk back into court the next morning with music swelling and everyone clapping. Real dignity returns slower than that. There were hearings, ethics reviews, medical follow-ups, Physical therapy for Emma. Nights when she woke up scared because her chest hurt. Mornings when I still checked corners of rooms before sitting down. An old prison habit that refused to die just because a judge signed a new order. Eventually, Maryland reinstated my law license. Eventually, the Attorney General's office created a special unit for corporate fraud involving public health and infrastructure. Eventually, someone asked if I would come back. On my first day, I arrived before sunrise. The courthouse was almost empty. The marble steps were wet from overnight rain. I stood outside for a long time, wearing a suit altered twice, because the old one no longer fit the man. Prison, grief, and fatherhood had made. Inside, near the copy room, a young assistant prosecutor stood over a stack of documents with red eyes and shaking hands. Her supervisor had already walked away. I could hear enough to understand. A clean report, a powerful contractor, a family complaint no one wanted to reopen. She looked at the papers like they were too heavy to carry alone. I knew that look. I had worn it 5 years earlier. I stopped beside her and placed one hand lightly on the folder. Clean paperwork can still carry dirty truth, I said. She looked up. I did not give her a speech. People drowning in doubt do not need speeches. They need someone to stand close enough that the room feels less empty. Outside the courthouse, Emma waited with Claire, who had become more family than assistant by then. Emma wore a yellow sweater that hid her surgical scar and held the red hospital wristband sealed inside a tiny plastic sleeve because she insisted important evidence should be protected. She ran carefully, not fast enough to scare me, but fast enough to make me forget how to breathe for a second. Dad? Yeah? Are you going to put bad people away again? I looked back at the courthouse doors. For years, I thought justice meant getting my name back, my career back, my place in the room back. But standing there with Emma's hand in mine, I understood something quieter. Justice was not the room letting me back in. Justice was making sure the next person carrying the truth would not have to stand outside alone. I squeezed her hand. No, I said. I'm going to put the truth back where they buried it. Emma thought about that. Then she gave me the same brave little nod she had given me in the North Bridge lobby. Then go make them see you. So I did.